March to present the ultimate buff. Only on the My Backers app. Unlock an epic skin for an iconic character. Buff you.
That would have been a good way to get me into Macca's 5 years ago. Alright, FRIYAY. That's what it says. Friday. Gonna do pull-ups, lunges, Russian twists, and I'll figure out the fourth later. Because again, I don't know why I've just been feeling so lazy lately. Maybe I need a deload week. I need to see if I've done 8 weeks of training yet. I do a thing every 8 weeks where only once I hit 8 weeks of continuous training, then I'm allowed to give myself 1 week of either no training or light training. I don't have to do it straight off the bat once I hit 8 weeks, but once I hit 8 weeks, I know from then and on out, whenever I feel like it, I'll just give myself a deload week. Because I just sometimes just not feel. But it is Friday, I'll get through today, see how I feel next week, maybe sometime in the future. And even if I do a deload, like I said, I've gone from just resting to now doing light exercise, showing that you don't have to go all the way, like you have to completely rest up, depending on your, I guess, how much time it takes for you to recover. Sometimes a bit of light resistance exercise is good for the recovery and whatnot, rather than completely just resting up. The fourth exercise, I'll figure that out later as I go through the program. Looking into buying a weighted vest, but I am a very frugal person, so in the end, I'm just like going to use that bag over there, add a few weights to it for my pull-ups, my lunges, and whatever else I can add it to. I'm getting to a point where I need to add a bit more resistance to my training. So I'll start by with that bag. I was looking to weighted vests are expensive. And the vest alone can cost anything from, I don't know, $50 to $100 from a quick search I just did this morning. But yeah. And then in the end, I'm just like, you know, just grab a bag, put some weight in, and that's it. You practically have a weighted vest. I guess the only thing that it doesn't have is like when you put on your back, you don't have like a belt line things for it to stop it from swinging and whatnot. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on from the front. It's a lot easier to stabilize. You'll probably see it later. Anyway, better get started. I got work later this afternoon, but a decent amount of time until work comes around. Alright, anyway, let's get started. As usual, I'll just be playing stuff in the background. Need to talk, need a message, by all means, just ask. Always happy to give questions. I guess if I was a teacher. But yeah, always happy to give answers. I need to change things to here. I'm gonna put up one of my point things where I might like check you guys' postures, but I'm happy to give that for free. Anyway, don't need points. I know how to put it out there just to get you guys.
What's up, you beautiful bastards? Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show. Buckle up. Make sure you hit that like button. Welcome back. Buckle up. For you today, make sure you're subscribed, and let's just jump into it. We've got some crazy shit going down in Milwaukee. Right, so where we'll start is you got this guy, D'Angelo Wright. He's on a drive in Milwaukee. All of a sudden, he sees something. He pulls over and decides he's going to intervene. With the thing going down being in the middle of the road, you had a 62-year-old white man grabbing a 24-year-old black man by the neck, with the 24-year-old's family saying that he's developmentally disabled. And so with all this going down, Wright takes out his phone and he records.
Record. Let go of his neck. He's not
Stole a bike, ran over a friend of mine's yard.
Let go of his neck. Let go of his neck. Let go of his neck.
I can't even.
Fine.
I can't even touch it.
So the older man's on the phone with someone, possibly police, and as you heard, he claims the younger man stole his friend's bike. But then, seconds later, he appears to contradict himself, saying not the younger man, but the younger man's friend stole the bike.
This kid over here, one of his friends stole a bike, ran out of a friend of mine's yard.
Also, later adding that the stolen bike was green, but as you can see in the video, the bike is blue. Not that necessarily any of those details are decisive in if this was okay or not. It's just important to add that context.
At the moment, there's only 5 kilos in this vest. I tried 10 before. I'm going to burn out real quick about 10, so let's see how 5 goes.
With also notably at least 2 protests being staged outside his residence, demanding that he get charged, accusing him of racism and vigilante justice. Some going as far as to even compare it to other cases of white men taking the law.
I'm hoping my door friend can handle it.
Murder of Ahmaud Arbery, and while that obviously resulted in the loss of life, it is true that it does feel like we do live in a time where because people are recording, we're seeing different end results. But as far as what happens here, we'll have to wait and see. And then I'm starting an OnlyFans. Not something I can say because I think my wife hates money and is not on board, but is something that Markiplier is saying right now. Mark, if you don't know, one of the most successful homegrown online creators. Really, it just has too many successes to list off. But on Monday, he announced to the world he will launch fans if his podcasts go to the
Alright,
top
that's
of
a good weight.
Spotify and Apple Music, which he claims will feature tasteful news. Which, if that doesn't translate to his
If I had
chicken
10
balls
kilos
wearing
in here,
top hat and
it's a bit
monocle,
too
he'd
much.
be very disappointed.
I could do it,
the
but
disappointment would still be
like I
major
said,
because he says that
started to
all
feel
the
stuff in my
proceeds
shoulders
will
and
be
whatnot.
donated to charity, which is a cool thing, but also one that makes sense. I saw him go on a podcast recently, and he was like, "Yeah, it's really stupid how much money I have. All I ask is if he does actually launch this, we don't refer to it as Mark's OnlyFans. We refer to it as Mark's
Weighted
Donos,
lunges.
but Donos means donate. I'm gonna keep workshopping.
Stole some of these
on it.
exercises
But
from
when Mark started to trend
knees over
on
toes
Twitter,
guy.
And then this whole situation became another thing, and it's something that gained a lot.
So
of
by lunging
traction
just a
in
bit
its
more
own
forward
right.
past your
Lunging
toes,
and Markiplier defends
you work a bit more with the
PewDiePie's
quadriceps.
anti-Semitism and anti-black.
You do all the legs,
no longer
but
feel comfortable supporting him. However,
depending on your
if
form,
you do, that is perfectly fine.
can
Just
concentrate
know
on
when
different
you support,
muscles.
Good night. Right, with that, alluding or rather referencing to the incident back in 2017, where Markiplier defended PewDiePie, who at the time had made comments that led to many labeling him as anti-racist.
I want to be very clear about something. Felix is not an anti-Semite, and Felix does not advocate hate. And I'm not even defending the jokes that he made, because even he has apologized for some of the jokes that he did. But he, as a person, as an inherent human being, he's not these labels.
Well, of course, with this, you had people going after Markiplier and PewDiePie, and people defending Markiplier and PewDiePie. One of the defenses was very notable. They are PewDiePie's editor, who happens to be a black man, jumping into the fold and responding. PewDiePie is so anti-black and racist that I'm still employed. All of this also resulting in a lot of people digitally groaning about this controversy. Saying things like, "This was 5 years ago. Stop. As a victim of my past getting dug up and used against me, leave Markiplier alone. Holy shit." As well as, yes, a vid from 5 years ago, and in recent times he has not done things with PewDiePie and doesn't talk about him. As well as people really trying to say that Mark saying to not send death threats to PewDiePie 5 years ago makes him a bad person. Yeah, ultimately that is the situation as it is now, and of course with it, I'd love to know your thoughts. Also, this happened while I was recording today. It looks like Mark is launching that OnlyFans. Or another way to put it is that Markiplier beat Joe Rogan with his dick. Fuck, that would be a really good title, but I would get and then Netflix is not dead. Or things have been looking great for Netflix. They lost nearly 1 million subscribers over the summer because of competition. They're laying off hundreds of employees. They were shutting down offices. Also, after years of even joking about people sharing passwords for Netflix accounts, the news came out that they were going to reportedly try and crack down on it. It was also rumored and later revealed that they're actually going
I'll
to
start the
launch
next
a
set,
people
let's
ad support
say
plan. That is actually going to be launching relatively
sub
soon.
130
But the
beats.
big news. Netflix announced they gained 2.4 million subscribers in their last quarter, which is a huge number on its own. But here's a key thing to remember. This is double what they actually expected they were going to get. Even when they said that they were going to gain 1.2
always comes around
million
too quick.
subscribers, people were like, "Are you though?" So this morning we had shares going up, and it's going to be interesting to track this. Or what is the password sharing crackdown going to look like? What is the reception of the ad-supported tiers going to be? How's that going to affect the business? Who knows? But what I will say is, with them being the blockbuster killer, I think they realize they can't just do nothing. And then, "I reclaim my time" is not just a statement that Katie Porter uses when she's dunking on tech and oil execs, but rather it's what tons of Americans have been doing over the last year or so, with new research showing that Americans who are now working from home have reclaimed 60 million hours of their life. But according to research by Stanford University professor Nick Bloom, about 15% of the
working from
workforce still
home.
works entirely remotely, and 30% have
I'm
a
just
hybrid
jealous that I'll
schedule.
never
Where a lot
be
of the
able to do
time
it.
being taken back are the commute time.
Well,
With everyone reportedly getting around an extra
unless
hour
this
of
goal
sleep.
works
Also
out.
using that time for different types of leisure, right? Watching stuff, playing with the kids, cleaning up. And while obviously not every job can be work from home, as someone who has fully embraced it at his company, I fucking love it. Like, yeah, there are some downsides, but the positives greatly outweigh those. And of course, because I like to make every story about me, when, I had my health troubles earlier this year, it made me really think about, like, how every hour of my life that I have is incredibly valuable. And at minimum, I was losing an hour a day from a commute, if not more, right? Because that's an important thing to remember. Like, if you have a 9-to-5 job, it's not really 9 to 5. It's all that prep time, all that commute time both ways. And if it's a really draining job,
right.
it takes even more time to recover. And personally, I haven't
So you get
found
a lot
that
of your
to have
life
made,
back working
anyone
from
on my
home.
team less productive. But I also think that's because when there's less downtime, it's easier to be engaged and be high performing. Or they've mastered the art of bullshitting, and I just haven't realized that things have gone downhill. Either way, pretty impressive. And then, you might now know why some people are being eaten alive by mosquitoes and others not so much. And this thanks to a new study that's in Scientific American now that explained that they took 64 participants, had them wear nylon stockings on their arms, and after 6 hours the nylons were imbued with each person's unique smell. While you and I might not be able to really smell the difference between either, apparently the mosquitoes could. And they found in this study that the mosquitoes were most attracted to people that put out more carboxylic acid. Humans produce these acids in our sebum, which is the oily layer that coats our skin. There, the acids help to keep our skin moisturized and protected. Humans release these at much higher levels than most animals, though the amount varies from person to person. Though the researchers said this is not definitive yet, saying the mosquitoes could also be attracted to the skin bacteria digesting the acids that we produce. And also adding, and this is good news or bad news depending on if mosquitoes like you or not, it appears that personal factors like changing the soap you use or changing how you eat had pretty much no impact when they tested the subjects again. Though possibly good news if you are currently mosquito food, it is believed that the study could help create better mosquito repellents. And then I want to take a second to thank today's sponsor, Keeps. Did you know that 2 out of 3 guys will experience some form of male pattern baldness by the time that they're 35? Maybe you got that friend or that family member that's dealing with hair loss, and if you don't want to just wait around for that to happen,
feels like
you,
a good
you don't have to. Whether you're looking to prevent hair loss, stimulate hair
time
growth,
to
or
wait.
just take better care of the hair that you have, Keeps has you covered. Keeps helps you stop hair loss before it's too late with a scientific and affordable approach to treatments that are up to 90% effective at reducing and stopping further hair loss. And in addition to clinically proven treatments, Keeps has an award-winning all-natural thickening shampoo and conditioner system. And you can get these products delivered directly to your door, meaning no more going in person to the doctor's office for your prescription, saving you both valuable time and money. So if you're ready to take action and prevent hair loss, go to keeps.com/DeFranco or just click that link in the description to receive 50% off your first order. And then, are abortion rights actually the mobilizer that Democrats think they are? That is the million-dollar question that's been up in the air ever since Roe v. Wade was overturned, and now especially headed into the midterms. Right, so far, the topic has been a major mobilizer for Democrats online with conversations, with polling, but will that actually turn into votes headed into the midterms where historically the party that's in power loses votes? And as we've talked about before, even with the polling, right now it appears that Republicans are widely expected to retake the House this year. You know, we've seen Biden vowing that abortion legislation is a top priority next year, saying that the first bill he sends to Capitol Hill is going to be to codify Roe v. Wade. That is, if Democrats are able to control enough seats in Congress for that to even be possible. Something I saw one outlet saying is a worrying sign that voters even need to be reminded about. But regardless, abortion rights to many seem like the possible thing to tip things in their favor, and that includes people like Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin. She currently serves Michigan's 8th district, but she's running for the 7th because it includes much of the areas she represented before redistricting from the 2020 census. And a key thing here is that Slotkin was one of the only Democrats to win their congressional elections in districts that Trump won in 2020. And now this year, her race has been described as one of the most competitive in the entire country, with her facing off against Republican State Senator Tom Barron. So to get a better idea of what's happening in general, but especially on a more local level, how is the race going, what's on the line, we've reached out to Representative Slotkin.
I think what's at stake, especially in a place like Michigan, is kind of just what is the direction we want our country to take? What is the way out of this extremely volatile moment in our history? And for me, I just am unwilling to accept that we may have seen the high water mark on our rights in this country, and now we're just rolling backward.
And Slotkin also went on to note that abortion is literally on the ballot this fall in Michigan in the form of an initiative called Proposal 3. For Proposal 3, it would codify abortion protections and other reproductive rights in the state constitution and replace an existing law from 1931 that bans all abortion. While Slotkin did note that her district generally identifies as pro-life and abortion has barely come up in her past elections, tons of people have been mobilized around the issue now that reproductive rights aren't guaranteed.
Once that right was lost, it really galvanized particularly women. And I'm not just talking about Democratic women, I'm talking about independent women, Republican women, people sort of pulling me aside and saying look, I identify as pro-life and I could never personally have an abortion. I've never walked in another woman's shoes. I wouldn't tell another woman how to live. And if you strip away all the political conversation about this and you just look at the human side of it, I think women especially understand that a full ban on abortion, black and white, it just does not work with real life. But where we're seeing it totally change the game is with our college age students. With Michigan State University, we have a huge effort to register voters, and both the people who are showing up to be paid as someone who's doing voter registration on campus, they're majority women, and the majority of people who are registering when we knock on their dorm doors are women. And this is the motivating issue for a lot of people who, again, maybe wouldn't vote in the midterm.
That last part is a very key thing to remember because the student body of Michigan State University makes up a big chunk of Slotkin's constituents, thus giving younger voters a unique opportunity. We actually asked Slotkin if she thought that Michigan State students could ultimately determine the outcome of her race.
Yeah, I don't even think that's a theoretical thing. That's just factual. We need anywhere between 6,000 and 10,000 more votes to come out of Michigan State and to vote on campus. But I don't think without those Michigan State votes that I would be winner.
For both those younger voters and the rest of the district, Slotkin said that her opponent doesn't have the people's best interests at heart, especially when it comes to abortion.
I think like past behavior is the best indicator of future. So he has been, to his own admission, very, very pro-life his whole life. He supports the overturning of Roe v. Wade. He will not say that he believes in exceptions for women who have been raped or the of incest. And then really what I watched was in the state legislature, he authored a bill to increase
It's supposed to be 21 degrees outside, but man, it feels humid.
Right, like it wasn't enough for him. This was
Also,
years
my
ago.
body's
It wasn't enough for him that abortion
this
should
summer's
be
gonna be
illegal,
fun.
but like he really wants to criminalize it. And to me, that's a person that if they are presented with a federal ban on
25
abortion,
beats.
which is a very real possibility if the Republicans flip the House. There are some adamant pro-life folks there who will put up a bill to ban abortion. I think he won't be pinned down on this issue, but you have to look at his past behavior that he would vote yes on a federal ban unless he says otherwise.
But it's also important to remember that federal abortion rights aren't the only thing at play here, right? Slotkin also said that Bear poses a very serious threat to election security and democracy for all Americans.
Well, look, again, we've seen his actions. Michigan was one of those states where they tried to say it wasn't a legit vote, even though Biden won by over 150,000 votes. He was summoned to the Oval Office by Donald Trump, and he went. He authored or co-authored a letter that questioned the results of the 2020 election. And he said in one of our debates that he thought that debate and that back and forth leading up to January 6th was a good thing, right? It was a healthy thing for our country. Congress does have the responsibility of certifying the election. That's why we had an armed insurrection in the Capitol, because they were trying to stop that. So I think, like, to me, again, this is a person who has shown through their behavior where they land on things. And if there was questioning of the election again, and even though every authority had said it was a legit election, I'm not sure how he would vote and whether he would certify an election. The results of 2022 absolutely set up 2024, and whether we're going to be able to have a democracy that survives by electing the person that the popular vote goes.
Also, something I really loved from the Slotkin interview is something she kind of talked about regarding people that feel like their vote might not matter. When you're living through history, there seems like chaos. It's very easy to want to disengage. There was this point where she was talking about this 24, 25-year-old woman that she was speaking to, and she said this.
I talk to so many young people who are just like, I hate politics. I talked to a woman yesterday, and she was, I knocked on her door, on her mom's door, and she was in the background. She's like 24, 25 years old. I said, what about you? You know, your mom's voting. Like, what about you? She's like, I don't fuck with politics. I said, okay, but politics can fuck with you, right? And it's just a matter of time until some politician makes a decision that affects your life. And if choice isn't a glaring example, there are about 20 others that I can name for you. And so, you may not like it, but the only way to make it better is to be engaged. And for me, it starts with who we're elected. It is easy to feel down and dark about the future of the country. And certainly, if I were 20 years old right now, looking at how a mess the politics are, how a mess so many policies are, I certainly understand and get those dark moments involved. But I think it's really important to look at history as and put ourselves in context where we are at this moment. We're going through a really, really difficult time in our history, but it's not the only really. The average person in those moments did a few inches more than they were doing, and they got engaged, and they started like taking it to the man, and that's what got us through those moments. And then there were decent enough leaders to receive the ball and do something about it. So I believe in that. I believe in young people making massive change. That is our country's history. I hope to be one of those principled leaders that they deserve.
And then I want to take a second to thank a sponsor of today's show, Established Titles. Established Titles is based on a historic Scottish custom where landowners are referred to as lords and ladies in English. It's not just this fun gift to give anyone, but especially those hard-to-shop-for people in your life. Title packs give you at least 1 square foot, a dedicated land on a private estate in Edelston, Scotland, and an official certificate with a crest. Personally, I love that they're huge supporters of global reforestation, working with charities like One Tree Planted and Trees for the Future. So with each order means 1 tree gets planted. Established Titles says they've saved over 170 acres of woodlands in different parts of Scotland and planted over 2 million trees globally with Trees for the Future alone. Well, I cannot guarantee your friends will embrace your title. It does make an amazing last-minute gift. Plus, Established Titles is running a massive sale, and when you go to establishedtitles.com/Franco and you use code DeFranco, you get an additional 10% off. And then, drug use is absolutely skyrocketing right now. For example, if we look to the UK first, there was a report that found that across 2021, 1 in 3 16 to 25-year-olds had tried drugs across the year, which was a 50% increase from previous highs. And around this, you had Vice speaking to a lot of young UK drug users, and a lot of the stories were very depressing. One young woman saying she abused ketamine to just numb everything for a while. Another saying she used K to help with the stress of adulthood, especially because she felt unprepared for adulthood after being in the lockdown for years. And it really looks like the impact of all of that, it's going to continue on for years. With in fact 23% of young Brits saying that they won't ever recover from the emotional impact of the pandemic. It's also led to the relative happiness and confidence of 16 to 25-year-olds being the lowest that it's been in 13 years. Also, I think a key thing here would be to then continue conducting this study moving on, because the logical reason for this is that COVID lockdown restrictions were starting to be lifted around this time. However, the report found that the primary reason that people were using these substances was to escape problems in their lives. Many of these problems are economic. They're fueled by the UK's recent decisions to leave the EU, alongside an energy crunch as Russian retaliation for supporting Ukraine. So you have that, plus a bunch of other factors, including, there's been a huge spike in the cost of living, with inflation hitting like 10.1% today. Also, the average cost to buy a home increased nearly twice as much as the average worker's wage over the last 50 years, which is, someone that tracks the California retail market, I can sympathize with. Like, you see reports about celebrities buying like a $4 million home, and you're like, oh yeah, that used to be $2 million 2 years ago. And as these numbers rise and rise and they go insane, like, the hope to be able to actually ever own a home and have that stability, it goes away for more and more people every day. Speaking of California, one of the questions that pops up is it just the UK? Are we seeing something similar here in the US? And to that, I would say, there wasn't really a one-to-one study, but it does appear that at the very least, there are similarities. With, for example, the National Institute of Drug Abuse finding that marijuana and hallucinogen use among young adults reached an all-time high in 2021. But also, key thing here, smoking a joint in your room, doing mushrooms or doing K, not all the same thing. Plus, it's not even considering other hard drugs like cocaine, though I feel like if I mentioned that cocaine is a hard drug to a lot of people in Los Angeles, they'd be like, no, it's not. But to me, that shit was always scary, and now, like, the percentage of fentanyl found in cocaine, like how often that happens, is fucking insane. And I do think that when we talk about drugs, we have long conversations. They do need to be nuanced, or we can't treat all drugs the same. Like, when we talk about marijuana, it still boggles my mind that there are people that still treat that like it's a hard drug. Or if you talk about the opioid epidemic and that, two different things. I think that's a key thing to remember, because while drug overdoses have increased in this country, the perception that drugs are an issue has gone down, which is why I think a huge part of moving forward to a better future, a safer future, is having really honest discussions about drugs. Right? Because even with the main drugs that we talked about, right, marijuana, magic mushrooms, ketamine, I'm not against all of those. I think there have been really interesting studies regarding magic mushrooms with getting over depression and PTSD, right? But the main thing there, it's in a therapeutic and medical setting. Same thing with ketamine. There's a lot of really interesting, important studies that are coming out. And of course, those who have watched me for a long time know that I've been for marijuana legalization since it became a popular idea. But also on a personal note, in the past 2 months, I've actually quit all drugs. And even that makes this a story that I can relate to, because, like, man, during the pandemic lockdowns, like, I couldn't go to sleep unless I had some weed at night. It became this every night habit, and I don't think it was anything like I was addicted. It just became like, this is the only way that I can fucking deal with the insanity that's happening during these 2 years. But recently, like, I was feeling it in general, but also I was on a podcast that for someone else that hasn't aired yet. During it, I was like, man, I'm having memory troubles. I'm not as quick as I used to be. Is it maybe because of this? Let me stop. And so far, it's felt like a really good choice. And at the very least, it was nice to show myself that I didn't actually need it. That it wasn't just saying I could stop at any time, that I could actually do it without, like, it being a thing. But hey, this is YouTube. I can't promise any fucking place is a safe space. But I really am interested with this story about your thoughts on it in general, and also if you have any kind of like personal takeaways over drug use in the last 3 years, if you would like to share it in the comments down below. This is a show, but we're also a community. Let's talk it out. And then here's what you need to know about gas prices and oil right now. So prices have been skyrocketing as the war in Ukraine continues, and it certainly didn't help that OPEC and Russia, which together make major impacts on the oil market, decided to work together and cut production, which is what has led to you seeing gas prices here in the US creeping up against an extreme high earlier this year, with now all of this leading to the Biden administration announcing another release of crude oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, while also boosting domestic production. Right? And notably, that is a massive reserve of fuel that the country normally has for self-defense, but it's also flexible. It can be used as a way to relieve pressure at the pump. If you're like, why am I getting deja vu? Why does this sound familiar? It's actually because the Biden administration has been releasing fuel from the SRP for a while now. It started last spring, and since then it's released nearly 180 million barrels of crude oil to address high gas prices. And this release is supposed to be the last one, as the US doesn't want to dip below a certain level for the SRP, but there are rumors that the administration is open to releasing more in the wintertime if it's needed. Especially, remember this number, if crude oil ever dips to below $72 a barrel. With the administration having plans to buy a fuck ton of it to replenish supplies from West Texas Intermediate if that happens. Notably, there are also other plans to help fuel prices, with the U.S. and other Western countries planning to implement a price cap on Russian oil by early December. Now, that said, Russia claims it won't sell oil under a price cap, but the U.S. and other nations believe it's a bluff, as Russia won't have many other options. While it's not the most important thing, something to keep in mind is obviously that won't happen until after the midterm. But the administration is likely hoping that the news of this, alongside the relief at the pump, is going to help them at the polls. So, based off of human nature, I don't think it will. I think the gas price situation is one of those things like you don't think about unless it gets worse. So I think this is more the administration trying to prevent a negative thing rather than getting points. Though that is also probably part of the reason why Democrats have been publicly on the warpath.
124
They're hoping that some of the pressure on Dems will be relieved by blaming continued high prices on refiners. It's also not a shock that so much thought is being put into this, because for most Americans, the economy is by far their number one concern. And that is where that story in today's show ends. It's always easy to watch and like and be subscribed to my daily dives into the news here. You can also go to
take a bit
affiliate.tv
longer than what you'd expect.
Choice. Or if you want more news,
Because it's a lot more casual environment. I found what's helped me was streaming. So then when I look at my stream, it tells me how long I've been streaming for. And that, you know, you can use any timer for that, but with this, it's there. It's in my face. Keeps me on track. But the next one is, yeah, using this heart rate monitor to see, just keep that heart rate up, keep that intensity up constantly.
especially if you want me to keep putting out these extra large shows. Let's just jump into it. Ethan Klein facing a lot of backlash right now. The host of the H3 podcast, talking about Kanye West and all the controversy surrounding the anti-Semitism that he's spewing lately. Talking about how Kanye had been hanging out with the likes of Candace Owens, then leading them to talk about her work with the Daily Wire and Ben Shapiro. At that part of the conversation, you had people saying Ethan went DEFCON 3.
Got another fucked up joke I wanted to say. I was just gonna say, if there's another Holocaust, people start the Jews. If they start rounding up the Jews again, I hope Ben.
I think I might just add chin-ups,
or laughs.
pull-ups, whatever. It's my fourth workout, so I'll continue with Russian twists after this set, and then chin-ups again.
Can I not say that?
Yes.
What am I gonna?
I could do dedicated shoulders, but I think I did that about 2 days ago. I could do it again.
With him almost
Nothing's
instantly
stopping me.
facing a ton of
But
criticism and backlash.
I'm getting a good thing going with this chin bar.
Figures in
So
particular.
we'll
Well,
see how
others
many can
calling
do.
Ethan a scumbag, arguing that his channel should be deleted. People saying if Kanye deserves to be called out for his remarks, Ethan should as well. You also had others saying they don't agree with Ben Shapiro's views, but they think that the joke is too far. All of this even leading to a response from Shapiro himself saying, if there was another Holocaust, I would hope that Ethan and his family escaped. But maybe that's just me. But to that, H3 responded saying, hey Ben, it's a joke. Do conservatives know what those are? And sure, in poor taste, but not
Take
as
him
poor
to
taste
us,
as you
5 minutes
platforming
in the chin-up set.
anti-Semites who
Yeah.
spread dangerous conspiracies that lead
I'm
to
reaching
real
that point
violence
where,
against
yeah,
Jews.
it's something I
That's the
can do.
meaning of my joke,
My
but
body
of
might
course
give
you
up.
don't care about context. And Ethan doubled
Before
down
my
on
mind
the
does.
same yesterday during his podcast with Hassan Piker, who said this was a lot of manufactured outrage.
They always do this. They try to like deflect away and go, what about this guy? He's actually anti-Semitic. Or what about this guy? He's the real racist. Like it's a classic conservative trope at this point to turn around and like find anything and everything they can to shift the attention away. And you know, you gave them an opening with colorful language like that, for sure.
But along those lines, you also had a lot of people defending Ethan as well. People posting things like Ethan Klein is Jewish. Jews are allowed to make dark jokes about our own history. And adding like it's funny when MAGA freaks and conservatives cry about this shit, but you obviously do not care about Jewish people. Stop pretending we already know you hate us. As well as no one believes Ethan Klein is an anti-Semite. They know he is Jewish and that this was a joke. Klein has literally been swatted by neo-Nazis. Still, you had others saying, yeah, he can be a Jewish person, but that doesn't justify joking about someone being murdered. And actually, in a huge update to this story that happened while I was filming this video, looks like YouTube is cracking down on Ethan Klein right now. With a video where Ethan made the original joke about Shapiro getting taken down for harassment and bullying. And then even the new live stream today got taken down, with Hassan even going on his own stream later to confirm that it was taken down.
I woke up early this morning, went over the leftovers, and shot leftovers, and you guys won't be able to see the episode if you weren't watching live. The reason for that is because it's been taken down. Our boys came after Ethan, saying things that were definitely, you know, a little spicy, a spicy facility, okay? He went real full spice, okay? He went spicy facility with it, and of course he caught a strike because conservatives love outrage. So here we are.
Regarding the spicy comments, you had some pointing to this moment.
And so, but yeah, okay, so the usual suspects come along. All, basically, I would say if not openly anti-Semitic or like anti-Semitic adjacent, all these people, like if there's another Holocaust, these are the people pushing the button. I'm sure of it. You know what I mean? Candace Owens is gonna be the one to usher Ben right into that chamber. You know, talking about. Hey, bye-bye, old Benny boy.
Once again, this is updating in real time. This is a developing story. So while we wait to see what happens next, we get more answers. I'll pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts with this whole situation? And then online gambling, Twitch, debate, controversy. It's been very messy for a while now. A lot of creators taking shots at one another, being very, very public.
Second
all that
phase.
backlash leading to Twitch actually
Russian
banning
twist,
certain
most
types
likely
of
chin up.
gambling
I don't know.
content
I think
on
if I
the
could think
platform.
about another
A phrase
4
slash
I will,
question
but
that's been thrown around a lot
Ugh.
during this controversy, and also controversies like this, is it really worth it? People often throwing that question at the creators that were doing the most gambling on these streams. And the update to that question and story, if this is true, is for many of you, probably. I don't want to assume who you are as a person, but the dollars mentioned in this story, they're the kind of dollars that are mentioned in, like, when you were in middle school and someone was like, would you suck your own dad's dick for $100 million? And you're like, stop asking stupid fucking questions. But stay on track. That brings us to train wrecks. You had many creators on that platform pointing fingers at him, calling him corrupt, or he was very into gambling. A lot of his content was built around that. There's constantly been a question around that. And yesterday, if he is to be believed, he revealed how much money he brought in, saying,
I'll release what I got paid since the beginning of my contract. I've been paid $360 million for 16 months of gambling. I could buy Hassan, Pokey, and Ludwig all together and sell them and buy them again.
So with that, you had people trying to poke holes in that number, saying this is from sponsorships alone, that it doesn't take into account how much money he lost while gambling.
Doesn't matter, it's a lot
also
of money
funny that
anyway.
On and offline, he's given away around $70 million. But honestly, whatever the fucking number is, if we're talking about 9-figure numbers, it's a lot of numbers. Like when the biggest pushback is, it was probably only 8 figures. Like this, why are we having this conversation? But also, that wasn't the only reason Trainwrecks was in the news. Or possibly related to the ban on Twitch that most affects him. He announced yesterday, I'm going to create a platform or team up with one, and instead of only contracting large creators, I want to primarily contract small, mid-sized creators. Current platforms deem you irrelevant, but you are the backbone of the entire industry, and you deserve at least a little security. And this notably not only coming at a time where, you know, the Twitch gambling ban is going to affect him, but also as Twitch has announced that it is changing its subscription revenue payouts for certain creators. And so almost instantly, there were a lot of interested people. Personally, I will say I'm very interested to see if he actually follows through on this, and if so, what it looks like. Everything seems stupid or unthinkable until it actually becomes a thing, and then everyone's like, oh yeah, obvious. This is so obvious that it's a thing. But hey, time will tell, and in the meantime, I'd love to pass the question off to you. For $100 million, would you suck your dad? And then, this eviction story is one of the craziest I've ever covered. So it starts in the small town of Longmeadow, Massachusetts, with a 55-year-old woman by the name of Rory Wood. Rory, back in 2018, was evicted after fighting to stay in her home for years, then made to live on disability and a tent, and also interrupted her cancer treatment. So for her, eviction is a very, very personal thing, and while it's unclear she knows the person involved in this news story, somehow she finds out about a court-ordered eviction happening in Longmeadow. She reportedly drives to this house, pulls into the driveway where she finds protesters already outside, sheriff's deputies waiting for the occupant to return from court, at which time Woods gets out of her car. She goes around back to a flatbed trailer stacked with boxes full of bees. While donning a beekeeper suit, she turns this eviction into a sting operation, allegedly shaking these hives to get those little fuckers as pissed off as she was, then starting to open them, but then she sees a deputy coming, so she just goes fuck it and breaks open one of the hives. She flips another off the trailer. She unleashes a massive buzzing swarm with hundreds of aggravated bees onto the deputy, who gets stung in the face and retreats. Meanwhile, Woods allegedly opens more hives, then rolls one over to the entryway of the house to block the cops, who at this point try to stop her, but the bees keep them back, so they end up actually having to take shelter in the house. I'm calling it a reverse eviction, though eventually 2 deputies did manage to navigate the swarm and tackle Woods, with one of them reportedly telling her on the way to the police cruiser that he and several of his officers are allergic to bees, to which she allegedly replied, "Oh, you're allergic? Good." Meanwhile, you have the protesters there yelling at the cops not to arrest her. At this point, she's basically their hero. But for Wood, she has now been charged with multiple felony offenses, including assault with a dangerous weapon, which I can only assume means the bees. And as far as the damage from that weapon, police say that 3 deputies in a sheriff's office photographer were stung in the face, hand, ear, and back of the head, with one reportedly even going to the hospital, as well as there being several bystanders getting stung. But ultimately, where I'll leave this story is by passing the question off to you. What are your thoughts on this story that everyone's buzzing about?
Bit low now.
And then the NFL season now having started up, concerts in full swing, MLB playoffs happening, basketball starting this month. There's an event happening for everyone, and you're not going to want to miss out. Which is why I want to thank one of our fantastic sponsors today, SeatGeek. Whether it's concerts, football, baseball, theater, or more, SeatGeek puts tickets from all over the web in one place to make buying simple. You know, I'll use it for big events, like I use SeatGeek to go to the Super Bowl, but also I use it to see if there's comedians in town, catch the Dodgers game. Oh my god. My new favorite thing is snagging up tickets to watch LAFC. Soccer and hockey is definitely my favorite sports to watch in person. And that's also why SeatGeek's my go-to. SeatGeek wants to make sure that you're getting a good deal. So when you're on the app, you just look for the green dots. Green means good deal, red means bad. And I've also got the hookup for you. Use code Phil for $20 off tickets at SeatGeek. It's $20 off your first purchase with promo code Phil. So make sure you click that link in the description to download the app. And then, why do I make this show and the TikToks and post everything I do on social media if at the same time I am very publicly saying I think social media is largely poison for your brain? Well, to put it simply, I think that I'm the good kind of poison. You get your daily dose of vitamin DeFranco. It takes 25 minutes or less, and then you don't have to doom scroll. And all the people in the world could be like, get off social media, but I don't think that's realistic for most people. So a better option, especially because I know that if you're watching this show at some point, if not actively now, you doom scroll. Or you live in your life and for a second you're like, let me just take a moment to see what's happening. Oh, how to avoid being trafficked at Costco. How to know when you're crying out microplastics. 73% of Airbnb hosts have watched you poop. I made up that last number. But it doesn't change the fact that we need to have more and more conversations around social media and mental health. Last week we talked about that and the trend of people using places like TikTok as a resource to help them. And today I wanted to continue that conversation by focusing on how people can not just have a healthy relationship with their time online, but also how we can pass that on to other generations through media literacy. Because when talking to Dr. Melissa Shepard, Dr. Pamela Rutledge, we learned that we are the only ones that can be fully responsible for our own social media usage. Yes, we can blame and point fingers validly, but we should also be wise about everything and really take the time to understand this. Because as Dr. Rutledge noted, it impacts people in different ways.
It's really important for people to understand that the bell curve of people who get positive understand the dynamic very positive. But for a young person who doesn't have any media literacy, who hasn't been really in how visual information make them and engage them in ways that are unhealthy, it can be a very negative thing.
According to a poll earlier this year from the American Psychiatric Association Morning Consult, roughly 1/3 of adults say that social media does more harm than good for their mental health. And fucking 44% say social media has hurt society at large. But, like we've talked about before, despite these very valid concerns, it's unrealistic to think that most people can just give it up altogether because social media is too universal. So you have people like Dr. Rutledge saying one of the best things you can do to manage your relationship with it is to be very aware about why you are using social media to begin with. Even recommending keeping a journal for a couple of days where you write down what app you were using, how you ended up opening it, what you were doing.
What is it that I'm trying to get done? Is it helping or is it getting in my way? And once you've decided about those things, then you can make rules
most
for
mobiles that
yourself.
tell you how
Once
much
you zoom out,
usage
this
and
kind
time
of
you're on the
advice is so
internet on
logical,
Samsung,
almost
which is
seems
what I
obvious,
use.
except for the fact that it's just not
what
something we
will
think
be.
about in our day-to-day lives. Also,
nice
to
way to
essentially
track.
insert myself into the story, I highly recommend.
I still
you
feel like
just
it's a bit
get
much, but I try
journal
to keep my
and jot
social
shit
media
down.
scrolling
You
to
don't need
about
to be
3
like,
hours a
"Dear
day.
diary," but sometimes it'll be a few sentences.
easy during the
sometimes
weekdays
it's a few
'cause of work.
pages. It can help you in the now, but also it's a great way to be able to look back.
It's my
and
way
be
of
like,
getting
oh,
through
man,
work
things were
faster
really
as well.
bad,
I
or,
make sure
oh,
not to
those are
check
better
my
times,
phone the
what
whole entire
happened?
morning
At the very
until
least, I think
lunchtime.
it's just kind of good to break
Then
out
by
of that
that
cycle
point,
of consume,
not much
consume,
work
because a
left
lot of us,
anyway,
we just
because I feel
scroll
that
and
when I'm on the
scroll and
phone or
scroll,
at
we kinda
work
move on
checking
with
the
that kind of
time,
mentality. And then in addition to all the negative shit we end up consuming, I mean, you
indirectly,
can run into straight up misinformation. With in fact, misinformation
makes the
being
day
a
feel
big
a lot
issue that
faster.
most Americans are concerned
Yeah.
about. And that's not just me or you
Since-
projecting. In a 2021 poll, they found that 95% of U.S.
Since the
adults
change
believe
to
that
only checking my
misinformation
phone
is a
until halfway
problem,
through
which
the
may in
day,
fact be the
it's-
highest percentage of
total.
Americans that have ever
Let's just say.
agreed on anything ever. Though the notable
Anyway,
thing is that
rambling.
95% of people
Jesus.
have these concerns. There is a decent chunk that have that concern who are also consuming and promoting misinformation. Right? It's always other people or organizations that are the problem, with the vast majority of Americans saying that social media companies and social media users are to blame for the spread of it. But only 1 in 5 are extremely worried that they have spread it themselves. Which makes sense here, but also in life, we are often our biggest blind spot. And it's a hard thing to do, but it is something important to keep in mind. And in fact, Dr. Shepard touched specifically on health misinformation, which is just a massive subset of this massive problem.
I think honestly, it's just important for anybody who's consuming social media in any form to keep in mind, who is posting, what they're posting about. Even among us professionals, we're not free of bias.
You don't need me to tell you how biases can lead to misinformation, both in health and in other spheres as well. There's really no topic that's immune to it, right? It could be news, politics, celebrity stories, health, whatever. So Dr. Rutledge agrees with the mentality of always being extra aware.
So it's very important, again, for the user to have some level of media literacy, to understand that not everything is just because it's on TikTok or in the media that it's real or true or that person's an expert. It just means that person has a video recording device.
But how do you combat something so massive? Well, for starters, Dr. Shepard thinks that at least when it comes to health, the more professionals in social media, the better.
Those of us who are healthcare professionals, mental health professionals, can really do a good service by like getting on to combat some of that misinformation and just increase access to the education that people are wanting. I think it's still not a perfect system because like the misinformation tends to be so much more dramatic and exciting, and like that's the thing that goes viral. But I also think that as we as medical professionals share, true research supported information, we're also building a community of people that are more likely to relate to and trust us.
But also I think another key thing and a solution is equipping people with the power and knowledge of media literacy from a very young age. If we're going to live so much of our lives online, it's just going to be an extension of our everyday. We need to learn how to do that safely. And Dr. Rutledge, I think, had like a really good analogy when trying to talk about this.
We don't learn to drive by getting handed the car keys. We go to driver's training. Technology, smartphones, all these things are incredibly powerful. So what I would love to see is everyone, starting at a very early age, start to understand how these things work.
And in her eyes, saying that the best way to learn is no different than most any other thing, through experience, and arguing that this is especially true for young people.
I am also not in favor of parents using these sort of social app blockers, technology that keep children from places, then they never learn. And there's going to be all kinds of events where kids are able to access media without parental oversight. And if they don't have the skills to think critically, to make judgments, to know how to block, to know how to step away, they are very vulnerable. Once people become aware, they make completely different choices. And I think that is so empowering to see.
But really emphasizing that knowledge is power. But ultimately, that's where I'm going to leave this story for now. Also, regarding media literacy, I want to link to some resources down below in the description. Because, we live in a world where we can't control a lot, but we can control how we consume things, react to it, and what we do. Well, I think given enough time, no one can ever have a perfect track record. I think as long as we are trying to be better, that's the first step. Arguably, that's the key thing. And then I want to take a second to thank a fantastic sponsor of today's show, Ridge. I've had a Ridge wallet before they even became a sponsor. I love that Ridge is a minimalist front pocket wallet that's slim, RFID blocking, and comes with a lifetime guarantee. I think we all know that most men's wallets are trash. They're bulky. They just stash in all this useless bullshit, receipts, old gift cards, whatever. They're just not practical for the modern man or woman. But the Ridge, it helps you carry less, but always what you need. And the Ridge wallet's awesome, sleek design has to be what I love the most. There are over 30 colors and styles with 2 metal plates bound together by a durable elastic band, so it's easy to get out what you want and easy to put in something new. The key case is also super sleek and durable. It holds up to 6 keys and takes the jingle out of the whole key ring experience. And I truly believe Ridge products are a game changer. So check out their wallets, their key cases, all their goodness over at ridge.com/DeFranco, and make sure you use code DeFranco to get 10% off site-wide. And then people have been getting arrested in Florida, and even the police doing it don't seem to know why.
Actually, I guess you have a warrant? I'm not sure. Voters.
So that is just a bit of the absolutely wild, recently released body cam footage that shows people being arrested on charges of voting illegally. And as far as these specific videos, they come from 20 arrests made back in August by the Elections Police Force Governor Ron DeSantis created in response to false claims of voter fraud in the 2020 election. And the people who were arrested were specifically accused of violating a state law that bans people convicted of murder or felony sexual offenses from voting after their sentences are complete. And while those prohibitions on their own are not uncommon, what's different here is that back in 2018, Florida voters approved a constitutional amendment that restored the right to vote for many felons. So, a very key thing to remember, the amendment did not include people convicted of murder or felony sex offenses who were required to apply to have their rights reinstated through a separate process. But what we ended up seeing is that after the amendment was approved, Republican state lawmakers launched efforts to further limit felon voting rights, thus creating a ton of confusion. Not only were many felons unsure if they could actually register to vote, some county officials were also unable to figure it out themselves, with us seeing a federal judge even condemning the Republicans for creating, quote, an administrative nightmare and raising constitutional questions about their actions. And while that general confusion has persisted in the years since, it's made even worse because Florida voter registration forms still don't provide any clarity. But the Tampa Bay Times explain it. They only require a potential voter to swear under penalty of perjury that they're not a felon, or if they are, that their rights have been restored. The forms do not clarify that those with murder convictions don't get automatic restoration of their rights. When you go through all the body cam footage, it clearly shows multiple people confused about why they're being arrested. This including the man I showed at the top of this story, Tony Patterson.
What it is, I think the agents with FDLE talked to you last week about some voter fraud, voter stuff. when you weren't supposed to be voting, maybe.
Patterson keeps asking what he's being arrested for, and one of the officers explains it's because he voted when he wasn't supposed to due to his status as a sex offender. He says he didn't know and asks why they're doing this now if it happened years ago, and then after he's cuffed and put in the cop car, we see
Why would y'all let me vote if I wasn't
You're being done.
I'm not sure, buddy.
Right, and that's just one example, but according to reports, some of the people arrested say they've been
You weren't
told that
meant
they
to
were
vote
cleared to
because you
vote
were
by
a
election
previous
officials.
felon.
This
Fuck
including
me.
one man named Nathan Hard, who's also a registered sex offender, and he told officers the
Why do
story
you need a
while he was
warrant
being
for that?
arrested.
No one ever really explained all that.
Unless some politician is using all these felons for votes, I guess.
Your driver's license? Yeah. The guy there asked me, he says, hey, can you vote? He says, hey, I'm pretty sure I can. He goes, well, are you still on probation? I said, no. I got off probation like a month ago. He goes, well, then you can probably vote. Hey, just fill out the form, and if you can vote, they'll let you give you a card. If you can't vote, then you won't. I'm like, all right.
He goes with another woman, Ramona Oliver, saying she had been told that she was eligible to vote after being released from prison 3 years ago, where she was serving time for second-degree murder. And her lawyer claiming that she had applied to vote after someone working for a voter registration drive approached her. Also saying she completed another registration form 6 months later when she updated her address. And according to the Tampa Bay Times, after brief eligibility checks by the Department of State, which reports to DeSantis and is responsible for cleaning the rolls of ineligible voters, she was given a voter ID card both times. With the key thing there being that Oliver wasn't removed from the rolls until March 30th this year, more than 2 years later. And so with all of this, you have many accusing DeSantis of only arresting these people as part of a political strategy to bolster himself and his fake election claim. Because think about it, who wants to be on the side or even have sympathy for convicted murderers or sex offenders? It's very easy to hear this story and be like, okay, bad things are happening to bad people. But with that, you still have people saying, no, though, the law should be the law for everyone. If what's happening now is unjustified, that's the only thing that matters. And so as far as what happens next, I mean, all 20 of these people who are arrested face up to 5 years in prison. But as the New York Times reports, legal experts, including at least one Republican state legislator, have said that many, if not all, the 20 arrests appear unjustified because the supposed perpetrators had no idea they were breaking the law. And noting, in Florida, a conviction of voter fraud requires proof of intent. So you have many people pointing to the body cam videos saying, look, they seem genuinely confused by a genuinely confusing law. But as far as what happens from here, we're gonna have to wait and see. And while we wait, of course, I'd love to know your thoughts on this. And then British Prime Minister Liz Truss is out, resigning today after it was clear she no longer had the support of her Conservative Party. And just wow. Truss was the country's third prime minister since 2019, and she only lasted 45 days. People were like, oh, she couldn't do worse than Party Boy Boris. No, she was out before the head of lettuce went bad. She was out 4.1 Scaramucci's later. And she had promised a new direction for the government and was elected under the premise that she would pass a major economic package. But her deal ended up being extremely controversial and included major tax cuts that many believed the country could not afford, leading to volatile markets and economic turmoil. In fact, it was so bad that the Bank of England had to step in to calm things down before pensions were fucked. And what really did her in was the perception that she had lost control of her party, which in the UK system is pretty much as bad as it can get. But there was allegedly chaos in Parliament yesterday after a vote on shale fracking turned into just a shit show, leading to accusations from the Labour Party that Conservative whips were literally placing hands on people to get votes behind the scenes. That was just the tip of the iceberg. You had Home Secretary Suella Braverman resigning yesterday, saying that she had concerns about the direction of this government. Also on Friday, the finance minister was fired, leading to Jeremy Hunt replacing him and quickly doing a 180 on Truss's proposed tax cuts. And I mean, if Truss is going to be remembered for anything beyond being the shortest serving prime minister, it's likely going to be for policy U-turns. However, despite all this, if her resignation still is coming as a shock to you after hearing about all this, I wouldn't blame you. And that's because just yesterday she told the public she wouldn't resign and added,
Mr. Speaker, I am a fighter and not a quitter.
though changing her tune today and saying, I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party. And as far as the reaction, the markets were very happy. Also, we had people loving the Daily Star lettuce bit. Lettuce we trust, just fucking beautiful. And I mean that just as far as wordplay. But, of course, the big important question here is, what the hell happens next? Or things have moved so fast, the Conservative leadership is scrambling to get the ball moving for a new leader. Until then, Truss is actually going to continue as PM. The top candidates right now reportedly being, and you're going to love this,
I should have said 120 beats.
Mordaunt Defense Secretary Ben Wallace,
I might do that.
our
When he gets
old
to sub
friend
120 beats,
Boris,
I'll
who
mix
is
it.
reportedly on vacation in the Caribbean, though
I don't wanna get
likely
this
packing his
faster.
shit up as fast as possible.
Maybe sub
Bojo is
125?
on the go, and no matter what happens, I'll let you know. But ultimately, that is where that story and today's show ends. I'd of course love to hear from you in those comments on whatever stood out to you the most today. Also, for more news that you need, I got you covered right here. You can play your tab. But as always, my name's Philip DeFranco. You've just been filled in. I love yo faces, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Would be for you and how to determine that, or if I don't have access to my sauna and
Listening
my
to Andrew
ice bath,
Huberman now. He's a nice
what I can do if I'm
master's
traveling
in
is I will take
neuroscientist.
a hot bath and then
A lot of
alternate
his
with cold
studies
shower,
is
hot
what I'm
bath,
interested
cold
in.
shower.
He's really
It's
big
hard to
into
do
fitness
hot
also,
bath,
but the
ice
science
bath,
behind it as
unless
well.
you have 2 baths. I don't know any hotel rooms, at least I've never stayed in one that has 2 baths, although I'm sure they're out there. But for me, this is heat, cold, contrast. And really what this day is about is 2 things. First of all, I'm trying to accelerate recovery from the leg workout I did previously. Also, if you listen to our episode of the Huberman Lab podcast about deliberate heat exposure, or you listen to our episode of the Huberman Lab podcast about deliberate cold exposure,
I used to do cold showers.
I talk about some of the benefits of
I did it for about a year and a
cold,
half.
and I get into a lot of details about how you can access heat. You can do baths, you can
Felt
do
nice.
saunas, you can even take hot showers. You don't have access to any of that. You could even wrap your body from the neck down in plastic garbage bags. Believe it or not, wrestlers used to do this. Put on some sweats and go running. That'll get you warm. Again, be careful not to overheat. And then you can get into a cold shower. So there's a lot of ways, depending on your budget and what you have access to. I don't use these cryotherapy chambers. They're hard to find. They're expensive. Again, I use sauna and ice bath. And I will do anywhere from 3 to 5 rounds, which is a lot. Anywhere from 3 to 5 rounds of heat for about 20 minutes and cold for about 5 minutes. How cold should the cold be? We covered this in the episode on deliberate cold exposure. Here's a general rule of thumb. It should be cold enough that you really want to get out, but not so cold that it's unsafe. And that will vary from person to person. So I cannot give you a simple prescriptive there. Same thing with the heat. Hot enough that you're sweating and that you want to get out, but not
If
so hot
anyone's
that you're
interested in
running
getting
the
into
risk
cold therapy,
of
cold showers and
injuring
whatnot,
yourself or killing yourself.
anecdotally
And
from me,
again,
from
that
my
will vary
experience,
from
takes a
person
good
to person. So you have to build up slowly, be
3
careful,
days to a
and
week
build up empirically.
to get used to
I do that on Tuesdays again as a way
The
to
obvious
accelerate recovery,
initial
and because it's
shock
very clear that there are cardiovascular benefits,
happens all the time.
maybe even benefits for the
But
brain
eventually, after 10, 20 seconds,
related to the cardiovascular
your body
benefits.
sort of normalizes.
Of course, the
Deep
brain
breathe,
needs a lot
control
of blood
yourself
flow
from
and
shivering.
needs a lot of nutrients and other things flowing into and out of there, debris out, and nutrients and other things
It's not
into
as
the
bad
brain.
as what people think. Might think.
Heat can help accelerate that or improve that, and so I'm doing that to improve cardiovascular function, improve brain health, and then the cold contrast provides a sort of accelerator on that, or an amplifier, I think is the better way to phrase it, on that process, because in the cold you get vasoconstriction, and then in the heat you get vasodilation, and so you're maximizing that process, which is actually a neural process. Nerves actually innervate the blood vessels and capillaries and even the arteries in order to allow that constriction and dilation.
So anything that's like cold and hot therapy.
So Tuesday is really about recovery, but my recovery day isn't
turn your body
necessarily about just laying around and not doing anything.
It
I might
expands,
still also take some walks that
cold
day. Remember,
constricts,
I want to try and get that 200
use
minutes of
heat,
zone 2 cardio across the week.
pump around the blood.
And
Use
sometimes,
cold,
not often, but sometimes I'll get
increase
in a
the
few
force of that pump.
minutes or more of walking quickly that day.
And then
But
keep going
generally
back
I'm
and
working
forth.
a lot on Tuesday, as I do on Monday, and I'm a little bit tired or maybe even a little bit sore from my leg workout the previous day, Monday. So I try and get that hot-cold contrast. There are other benefits to hot and cold contrast. We have a description of the different protocols for hot and for cold and their contrast at our Huberman Lab newsletter. You can find that by going to hubermanlab.com, go to the newsletter tab under the menu, and you can sign up. You can actually download those protocols very easily without even signing up if you just want to access them straight off. So Tuesday is really about recovery and about getting some additional cardiovascular benefits from heat-cold contrast. One other thing that's built into the rationale for doing a lot of heat and cold on one day as opposed to doing it every day, well, in addition to it being a little bit more convenient, because certainly some people don't have access to heat and cold, sauna and cold dunks, etc., every day, so maybe getting to do that one day is more accessible or feasible. But in addition to that, it's very clear that while there are benefits to doing sauna often, we talked about this in the Deliberate Heat episode and the episode with Dr. Rhonda Patrick when she was a guest on this podcast, it's also clear that if you do sauna seldom, that is once a week, but you do a lot of it on one day, so in this case it's an hour, if it's, remember, it's or more, it's 3 to 5 rounds of 20 minutes of sauna followed by about 5 minutes of cold or so.
3 to 5
By doing that all on one day,
20 minutes
the
of
peer-reviewed
sauna.
research that's covered in the episode on deliberate heat, this is a study
What
out of Finland,
pampering time
showed
do
that
you
you get
have?
massive, even 16-fold increases in growth hormone, which are extremely beneficial for
Must be a
metabolism
weekend thing,
and for
surely.
recovery. So these massive increases in growth hormone are seen when you are doing these sessions of sauna that are repeated on the same day, and you're only doing that about once a week, whereas if you do sauna more often, there are certainly benefits to that, but it's time consuming, and you need access to sauna more often than 1 day a week if you're doing it more than 1 day a week. But if you do it 1 day a week and you're doing a lot of sessions within that day, as I've detailed here, you see these massive increases in growth hormone that are not observed if you're doing sauna more often for the other benefits of sauna. Now, the effects of cold are many. It's not just vasoconstriction, but the effects of cold are also counterbalanced by some of the problems with deliberate cold exposure that maybe you've heard about on this podcast and a lot of other podcasts, and seem to be a kind of a buzz theme on Twitter and elsewhere. And the point is this: there are a number of quality studies showing that if you do deliberate cold exposure, in particular ice baths or getting into very cold water, immediately after an endurance training session or a strength and hypertrophy session, it can indeed, yes, it can disrupt or prevent some of the adaptations that you are seeking with strength and hypertrophy and endurance workouts. Okay, so you heard that right, and I believe that to be true based on now several quality peer-reviewed studies. So by doing your deliberate cold exposure on Tuesday, you're not going to get those effects, that is the blocking of hypertrophy or the blocking of strength improvement or the blocking or prevention of improvements in endurance that would occur if you immediately got into the ice bath after a hypertrophy, strength, or endurance workout. Now, the caveat to that is if you are somebody who likes to do cold showers, I am not aware of any data that says that cold showers cannot be performed after a strength, hypertrophy, or endurance workout. Cold showers are different than submersion up to the neck in an ice bath or another cold body of water for a number of different reasons. In fact, they tap into different aspects of the nervous system entirely. We don't have time to go into that now. It's covered in the episode on deliberate cold exposure. But the simple point is, by doing your heat and cold contrast, or hey, listen, if you're somebody who doesn't have access to sauna or you don't like hot baths and you just do some deliberate cold exposure on Tuesday, you are doing that separate from your strength and hypertrophy and endurance workouts such that it will not impede the benefits of those workouts. Okay, so long endurance on Sunday, leg resistance training on Monday, and on Tuesday, heat cold contrast. That brings us to Wednesday.
Really?
And
So that's
on
passive
Wednesday,
recovery,
we
then.
get back to a resistance training workout. And the resistance training workout that I emphasize on Wednesday
So this
is
is
one
his
in which you
protocol.
train your torso. Yes, literally your torso. I know this is counter to the so-called bro science of bro splits. I don't know who originated that term. It's a terrible term. It essentially alienates anyone who's not a bro or considers themselves a bro. But in any case, this is not about training chest or back or shoulders. In fact, it's really about strengthening the muscles of the torso, and of course includes the chest and the shoulders and the back. And I'm sure as I say this, a number of people out there who are obsessed with hypertrophy and muscle growth and filling out their shirts or whatever it may be are thinking, oh no, this is just kind of all around fitness. But no, the point is on Wednesday, you train your torso, and that's going to involve some pushing. So that's good for you. That might include some training of things like bench presses or incline presses, as well as shoulder presses or lateral raises, things for the shoulders, as well as for the back. Some pulling exercises. These could be bent over rows or chin-ups or pull-ups. Again, there are an enormous number of exercises for each and every one of these muscle groups. Now, I believe there's a clear benefit to training all these muscle groups together on the same day, because much in the same way that training legs all on one day can lead to these systemic effects because they're large muscle groups, working both the pushing muscles and the pulling muscles of the torso on one day, at least in the context of this program, is very time efficient and tends to wick out into a number of different dimensions of health that at least I'm interested in, and I think a lot of other people are interested in. What are those? Well, let's think again. I want to be strong in not just my legs, but my upper body. I also may want to engage some hypertrophy, to grow certain muscle groups in order to create a sense of balance. That could be for aesthetic reasons, but also for balancing strength and for health and the integrity of the joints, etc. And in addition to that, by training a bunch of different muscle groups together, you have the opportunity to get the more systemic hormonal effects and metabolic effects that occur when you're not just training one muscle group and isolating that one muscle group, but rather training a bunch of muscle groups together. So Wednesday, I train torso, and I do that in push-pull fashion just for kind of time efficiency. Sometimes that means doing a pushing exercise and then a pulling exercise. Sometimes it might even mean doing a set of pushing and then a set of pulling and going back and forth. However, if you're in a gym, in a particular crowded gym, please don't be one of those people that colonizes multiple pieces of equipment and says, I'm working there, and that can be quite a dance, and it can be hard to orchestrate a workout like that. So sometimes it will be, starting off with a set of shoulder presses and then doing all your sets of those, and then moving to your chin-ups, and then moving perhaps back to shoulders and realizing, someone's on the machine that I wanted or using the equipment that I wanted, so I'll just finish up the pulling, I'll finish up the back work, and then going to the push. I don't obsess over the alternation in any kind of strict way. I really just try and get the muscles of the torso trained. And again, it's 2 exercises per muscle group. And one of those exercises is going to be something where I realize this isn't physiologically accurate, but a shortening of the muscle, or where at the end of the movement, the muscle is under maximal contraction. I could throw out some names of exercises just for purpose of understanding. So this would be, like cable crossovers for the chest. The peak contraction is at the end, whereas something like an incline press, there's more of a stretch, provided it's done over a full range of motion at the beginning of the movement. So again, something where there's a stretch and something where there's a peak contraction. For the shoulders, it's a little bit harder to do, although there are ways to do that. And Jeff Cavalier has excellent workouts available, zero cost, on YouTube. He also has excellent programs on his athleanex.com site, but certainly has a lot of excellent protocols on his YouTube and Instagram. But on YouTube, you can put in his name and any muscle group that you want to train, and he has some terrific videos describing exercise choice and other features of exercise parameters. Again, a peak contraction or shortening of the muscle, peak contraction exercise, and a stretching exercise. And so for the back, one might say, okay, a seated row or a bent over row, or a dumbbell row where the elbow is brought behind the torso for a peak contraction movement, and then for more of a stretching movement, it might be something like a chin up or a pull up. And as I say this, I understand that stretching and peak contraction are the exact terms that one would use if they were a physiotherapist or a strength and conditioning coach. But I think for the typical who's trying to generate strength and hypertrophy in those muscles, or maintain
only when you're finishing out a set or
hypertrophy in those muscles,
the very
this
last
kind of nomenclature way of describing it, at least
course,
should
to a
be
degree, don't completely
clear
destroy your
and
technique
even
to finish
efficient.
off a rep.
And just to remind you, as with the leg workout, the total duration of the torso workout is going to be 50 to 60 minutes after a brief warm-up. The sets and repetitions are going to be dictated in the same way that I described earlier. So for about a month, it's going to be more sets, so anywhere from 3 to 5 sets in the lower repetition range, so 4 to 8 repetitions. So that's going to be heavier weights and longer rest, as I described earlier, the rest intervals. And then for the next month, it's going to be moderate repetitions, fewer sets, the same way I described earlier. And if you want more details on all of that, you can find that in the newsletter related to the optimal or foundational fitness protocol that you can access at hubermanlab.com. One thing I should note about the Wednesday torso workout is that I am a big believer in training what I believe is the highly avoided, or at least overlooked, but vitally important aspect of total body stability, strength, and safety, which is the neck. I realize a lot of people don't want a large neck, and I totally understand for aesthetic reasons why they don't want that. It's kind of interesting, actually, if you think about it, that people who have a large neck are often told they have no neck. People say, that guy has no neck, or they have no neck, when in fact they're referring to the fact that they have a very large neck. I don't know how that came to be. Somebody put in the comments why that is. How come when people have a big neck, they refer to it as no neck? So why do I train the neck? I train the neck for a couple of reasons. One is years ago I had an accident where I actually fell off a roof, and I'd been training my neck at that time for a sport that I was involved in, and I walked away from it with a sore neck but not a broken neck, and I thought, wow, it's really great that I have been training my neck. In addition to that, I was once in a car accident where I was parked, I just bought the car, my first new car purchase, parked in that car with my mother and my grandfather in the back seat at the red light, and someone rammed into us at full speed. Now, fortunately, none of us were hurt. We were all rattled. And once again, I was very sore in my back and in my neck, but I think one of the reasons why I was able to essentially walk away from that, I didn't have any sustained damage, was because I trained my neck. But I started training my neck for sport, and I continue to train my neck because I notice when I don't train my neck, I start getting shoulder issues. And if you talk to an excellent physiologist like Dr. Kelly Starrett of the Ready State, has an excellent channel, you can find him on all the social media and standard channels, or you talk to anyone out there who really understands the strength of the torso and the upper body and even the back, what you learn is that Of course, being the upper portion of the spine, stabilizing your neck is very important. Now, training the neck can be a little bit detailed and specific and even dangerous if you do it wrong.
Yes.
Again, Jeff Cavalier has a terrific set of videos on training the neck properly. I know a lot of people out there might think neck bridges, and I used to do neck bridges. I occasionally still sneak in a neck bridge here or there, although I don't recommend it because in discussions with Jeff, he will tell you, and it's true, that the discs eventually go, and you can run into serious issues from doing bridges, and it doesn't happen gradually, so you can't notice it happening. It just happens suddenly.
Boxing
So I might occasionally do a neck bridge, but in general, I'll train neck by wrapping a plate in a towel so that I don't end up with an imprint of the weight value on my head or face, and then moving the neck from side to side or front or back. And again, we'll provide a link to those videos. It's a terrific set of videos that describe how to train your neck properly and safely. So even if you're not trying to grow your neck, you definitely want to make sure that you use some light weights to make sure that your neck is stable and upright. I say stable and upright because it's very clear
I don't want to say too much.
Reasons related to texting and staring down at computers and related to weak neck relative to the rest of the muscles that stabilize the spine. A lot of people, their default stance or their default posture is with chin forward, and that's not good. Not only is it aesthetically not good, but it also can create all sorts of issues related to back pain and headaches and things of that sort. This is a real thing. Training your neck allows you to stand upright, sit upright. I even believe that it allows you to do things like public speaking or have conversations with people on the street in a way where you are front facing as opposed to looking down. So Wednesday is torso and neck, and then comes Thursday, and that means another cardiovascular exercise session.
Am I pushing myself?
Although it's a brief one. Unlike the endurance training on Sunday, the cardiovascular session on Thursday, again, for me it falls on Thursday, but for you it could fall on a different day, depending on when you started this protocol, is going to be about 35 minutes of, for me, running, although it could be rowing or it could be cycling, it could be something of that sort.
My arm's giving up.
The goal of this workout is what's important. The goal of this workout is to tap into, remember that long list that we talked about earlier where you've got skill and speed and power and strength and hypertrophy, etc., different forms of endurance, is to get into that range of endurance where your heart rate is elevated quite a bit more than zone 2, but that you're not really going all out sprint. So what that means for me is warming up for about 5 to 10 minutes. That could be jogging, a little bit of light calisthenics, might even be hopping on a stationary bike, although to be honest, I loathe the stationary bike. And then setting a timer and doing about 30, but ideally 35 minutes of what I call 75 to 80% of all out. Okay, now I realize this spits in the face of all you heart rate monitor wearing super techie exercise types, but when I think of all out sprint, I think of 100%. And what is that? In my mind, that's somebody is chasing me with a needle full of poison and I am sprinting away at maximal speed. That for me is 100%. So after a brief warm up, what I'm going to do is go out, typically outside, although sometimes it has to be on a treadmill if I'm traveling, and run for about 30 to 35 minutes at about 75 or 80% of that all out. What that means is that I'm striving to keep a steady pace, but in reality, I don't. I sometimes have to stop at a stoplight. There are cars. Please don't run into traffic just to maintain that speed and that timing. That would be terribly antagonistic to fitness, in particular lifespan.
It's raining now.
That running tends to be running in which I'm breathing hard, so I'm not able to restrict myself to purely nasal breathing. And I should have mentioned earlier, on the Sunday long ruck or weighted hike or jog, if I'm alone, I try and do pure nasal breathing. If I'm with other people or I'm talking, obviously, I'm not going to do pure nasal breathing because I'm talking, although I'm sure that sometimes they wish I was doing pure nasal breathing. That Thursday workout accomplishes a number of things. First of all, it really gets my heart rate up, and it improves multiple aspects of endurance, because as you recall earlier, the different bins of endurance that include muscular endurance, anaerobic, that 3 to 12 minute range, and then 30 minutes or longer, none of them really precisely match what's accomplished in this 35 minute or so cardiovascular session where I'm pushing hard but not all out. But that's exactly the reason to do it, which is that it taps into multiple fuel systems for the muscle and multiple aspects of the heart and capillaries and arteries and veins that are involved in generating that movement. So it really cuts a broad swath into multiple categories of endurance. And also just keep in mind what this foundational or optimal fitness protocol is really designed to do. In my mind, a foundational fitness protocol is one that leaves you or has you in a state where if you need to walk really far and carry a bunch of weight, you can do it. If you need to lift a heavy object with your legs, you can do it. If you need to run really fast for 2 minutes, you can do it.
You guys got to hear my shoddy
if you need
Vietnamese.
to run a little bit further, like maybe in 10 minutes, for whatever reason, you can do that. So it's a really kind of all-around fitness program, and that 35-minute run, again, could be swapped with a 35-minute erg row, or sometimes if you only have access to a stationary bike, you can do that. I suppose if you didn't have access to any equipment and running is not your thing, one thing that I have done, especially if I've been stuck in a hotel because I arrived late someplace and I really want to get this workout in, you could do the dreaded burpee. I know there's a lot of opinions out there. Some people think burpees are downright dangerous. Other people love burpees. You could do that. Or you could do
burpees are an
really
amazing
fast,
workout,
full
but you either
jumping
love it
jacks.
or you hate it.
It's a little
I haven't done burpees in a while. I might do it
class,
next
right?
week.
Physical education
I'll do it for 100,
class-ish.
episode 100.
But sometimes if I need to get the
But it's
workout
a great
in, what I'll
full-body
do in a
workout.
hotel if I've arrived late, particularly
Done properly,
day of
as long as you're
travel,
just
is I will
swinging your
find the
bodies up and
stairwell,
down.
the fire stairwell. I'll make sure, by the way, that I can get back into the building because I've been locked in those stairwells before. And I will simply walk really fast up the stairwell, as many flights of stairs as there are, or maybe even jog it, not quite sprint, but a run up those stairs over and over and over again in order to get that 35 minutes of 75 to 80% of max output cardiovascular work done. And if I'm really just restricted to my hotel room, I'll just do jumping jacks for 30, 35 minutes, sometimes while watching something on TV.
Worst
And
push-ups
believe me, if
ever,
you're doing
but I'll
full
take it.
jumping jacks, like really extending
That's
your
what I
legs,
said anyway.
really getting arms overhead and really doing the full movement, by the time you hit 5 or 6 minutes, you are going to be sweating and your heart rate is really going to be up. I also sometimes will travel with a jump rope. I always try and travel with a jump rope and skip rope, much to the dismay of the people who are housed below me in the hotel room. Skipping rope, I should mention, can be a very effective way of getting cardiovascular training while you're on the road. But in all seriousness, if you're in a hotel room or an apartment and you can't really jump high and you're very good at jumping rope, what you'll find is it's not going to get you into that higher elevated heart rate zone.
I'd recommend
It
mountain
can be great
climbers.
for zone 2 type training.
didn't
If
have
you're
a
really
rope.
good at skipping rope, and I wouldn't say I'm really good at it, but I've done enough skipping rope that I can just kind of cruise and talk, and it's more zone 2-ish. Even feels like walking at times. Now you can do double unders where you're really jumping and putting the rope under you twice each time, or crossovers, etc., depending on your skill level. But again, if you're in an apartment or you're in a hotel, that's going to be harder to do. And because there's some skill involved, sometimes you're stopping more often than you're continuing. By the way, and I just have to mention this, a really terrific Instagram channel is Anna Skips. This is a teacher, a science teacher, or I believe it's a maths, as they say in the UK, because she's in the UK, maths teacher. I don't know Anna, but I know she skips because she has this amazing Instagram channel called Anna Skips. What's really cool about her Instagram is she shows you her progression from not being able to skip rope at all to the absolutely incredible types of rope skipping that she's doing each morning while getting sunlight, which of course is an essential health protocol. So check out Anna Skips on Instagram. Really inspiring and made me want to get better at skipping rope. I'm still working on it. Okay, so with that Thursday cardiovascular, let's call it endurance, but cardiovascular training workout done, around rolls Friday. And on Friday, I'm going to do another cardiovascular.
Alright, set, finally done, workout done. Bit of a heavy one today. Did weighted chin-ups. This one comes in right at the end just to make sure I'm doing what I'm doing properly. That's what I do. Pull-ups, weighted. Lunges, weighted. More focus on the quads by going past my toes. And then I did Russian twists, weighted. And then more pull-ups, but non-weighted. But by the end of it, I was, give me a bit more rest. I can pump out a few more, but I think that's enough. Like, I don't know. like I said, I don't go to a failure. Who knows? Maybe I have so much more lift in me and I'm limiting my gains and not reaching my full potential, but you know, in the end, progress is better than no progress. A bit of something's better than nothing. Last thing I want to do is get injured, and you know, that puts me out for at least 2 weeks or so, who knows. But it's all about longevity. That's what it is. It's all about wanting to do what you want to do for as long as you can, and allowing your body to be able to let you do that. Alright. Anyway, that's it for today. I'm gonna go shower, make lunch, get ready for work, watch a few things, maybe chill for a bit, feed that guy next to me. I'll see about my forum workout this weekend. I'll be out this weekend. Well, I'm gonna be having a heavy night this weekend, but you know, night with the boys, you know, the usual. Anyway, till next time, take care, have a good weekend if I don't see you, and till next week. Probably hit that 100 by the Wednesday. We'll see. We'll hit the 100 by sometime next week. And in it already, I will be doing burpees. I'll try to think the most... Oh, yes. I'll try to think of the most punishing program for me. Let's see if we can get myself